Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to English 101. My name is Todd Soul, your instructor. And hey, today I wanted to talk about something that I've noticed over 35 years of teaching writing and writing and editing professionally on the side. Students often ask me, Todd, what can I do to improve my writing? If there were like 10 magic skills that I could master, what would those be? And I've actually given that a great deal of thought over the years. And so I prepared a little video here called The Top 10 Ways to Improve Your Writing. Now, I'm being a little sarcastic because obviously there are more than 10 things that you probably need to do in order to master college level writing and even beyond. But I'm going to kind of go by priority with 10 being the least important and 1 being the most important. And just let you see how my mind works as someone who has dealt with writing now for so many years. I've developed kind of a thick skin with writing. I have a good sense of what is effective, what's very effective, and then what's just acceptable and unfortunately ineffective as well. So I'm always looking at writing and have a pretty good handle on what it takes. But this will give you a little insight into my mind as well. So let's get started with our top 10 list. Here we go. So again, 10 being the least important, still important, but the least important. Learn all the comma rules. If you can't learn all of them, learn as many as you can. Commas are the most ubiquitous mark of punctuation that I add as an editor and as an instructor. You'll see if I'm handwriting a lot of little carets with the curly comma underneath it. Online, you'll just hear me write comma or see me write comma in the margins. Commas are probably the least understood mark. We tend to think of them as a pause, and that's not a bad way to think of it, but they keep sentences from falling into some real strange meanings. And let me just show you a few examples. So notice these two sentences. We saw the criminals, congressmen, and senators, and duplicate below, but notice that we have a comma here. Can you see the problem here, or perhaps understand the problem? Right now, if I say we saw the criminals, comma, congressmen and senators, what I have said it basically is what's called an appositive here. I have identified the criminals. Oh, they are congressmen and senators. Now, in today's politics, that might well be the case. But because it's not clear, we put in something called a serial comma. So we see the criminals, comma, the congressmen, comma, and the senators, period. The English like to call this the Oxford comma here. We call it the serials comma because it's 3 items in a series or 3 items in a row. And it makes it clear that they're not criminals. Years ago, I saw a concert. I can't remember if it was a live or I think it was on a TV program with John Denver. He's since passed on many years ago, died tragically in an airplane accident. But he was talking about how important punctuation is when you write music. And he was celebrating Christmas, some event around the holidays, and they were writing a song about Christmas kind of spontaneously. And when people were writing down the lyrics, someone wrote, "Throw that U-log on, Uncle John." And he was quick to point out that, commas can keep you from being hurt. Throw that U-log on, comma, Uncle John. This is what we call direct address. We don't want to be pelting Uncle John, poor Uncle John, with the log. So this is another important use of a comma. Here's one that came from a student not too long ago. It's one of my favorites. We sat outside the cafe eating, college students occasionally walking by. Sounds like something out of The Walking Dead, if you're a fan of that. Obviously, we need to separate some ideas here. So the way to fix that, you write, we sat outside the cafe eating, so maybe we're having a sandwich. Oh, by the way, comma, college students were occasionally walking by. No, that's not the best written sentence, and to be honest, I would probably rewrite the whole thing. But learn the comma rules. The more you understand them, the more you use them in your writing, the better off you're going to be. I see far more people forgetting to put commas in than I do see people putting too many in. That's a problem that's a little bit rare. So if you're not using many commas, there's a good sign you might be needing to do that more. Let's move on. Don't text while writing. Now, what a lot of people think I mean by that is, you're hammering away at your keyboard and you're trying to type at the same time. That's not at all what I mean here. Don't use text language in your essays. All these little tiny abbreviations that we get. I once had an essay from a student. The pronoun I was lowercase in the whole essay, and I had to tell him, hey, this isn't a text message. This is an essay. We have to be careful we don't do that. Related to that are what I call overused and junk words. You want to search and destroy words like huge, or expressions like there is, there are, you and your, which get overused. And in conclusion, we'll talk about conclusions more. Huge is a big one for me, though. Do we even know what huge means anymore? I used to think it meant enormous. But just to give you an idea, one of my students walked into class a couple semesters ago when we still had in-seat, and he looked kind of down. The person next to him said, hey, what's going on, man? And he says, oh, I had a tough day. And I said, well, what was tough? And he said, it was huge. Now, I think I know what he's trying to get at there, but in my mind, it's kind of like, is your day longer than mine? Is it filled with more tasks? Or, and I think we're seeing this overused in everyday speech. Newscasters are falling into it. Even I'm a big fan of a number of newspapers. I see the Washington Post and New York Times, the Guardian drifting into this. And I'm like, this word doesn't mean anything anymore. So it's a huge problem. Number 8, learn all the uses of your word processing software. Most of us just hammer away at the keyboards, trying to get things done. But you'll see there are these menus. Now, this is PowerPoint, but the menu for Word is very, very similar. This is a Word platform course. You'll be required to use Word, but you can obtain it for free, and you can find out how to do that once you open the MLA template on our Blackboard page. I'm going to show you lots of neat tricks that people forget sometimes come along with the software. So learn how to write papers according to whatever format your instructor requires. So MLA is what we use in this class. It stands for Modern Language Association. Think of it as like composition, history, the humanities. But if you have anything that's an ology, biology, geology, these kinds of courses, it follows what we call the American Psychological Association style. Now, some of you may have actually used APA in your essays. It's similar to MLA, but it's just annoyingly different that it's good to learn both of them. However, we're just going to teach you MLA in this course. We do require an APA essay in English 102. Chicago style, you probably won't use. That employs the use of footnotes and so forth. But we're gonna teach you MLA. So if you know MLA, great. If not, don't worry, you'll learn. So spelling, please make it a personal priority rather than a mechanical afterthought. Always run the spell check tool. I do it all the time. Nothing is more glaring than a spelling error. Now, Word will sometimes autocorrect certain words, sometimes it won't, but Word does not know the difference between two, and two. TO versus TOO versus TWO. And there are so many examples of where there are word errors because the student, as they were reading, didn't look very carefully and find the correct word. So they may have all the right spellings, but then there's a word error. And just to show you how some of these work, some of them are kind of humorous the way they come out. This is a response I get to email a lot, in email a lot. Student will say, I know that I defiantly did the assignment. It's almost like they're saying, what's wrong with you? I did the assignment. The word they're looking for is definitely 9 times out of 10. This next one comes from a student essay. It's really one of the cutest examples, and a little bit embarrassing, although she had a good sense of humor about it. Was writing a narrative essay, and she wrote, our dog is very genital with all sorts of people. She really meant gentle there, and I kind of circled it and put a smile by it. And when she saw my comment, again, this is when I would write on papers, she came up to me and said, has anyone else seen this? I said, no, just me. I said, and she said, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I said, well, that's okay, because male dogs can be that way sometimes. So maybe there's some more truth in that. Transitions. Use them correctly. A lot of students tell me my writing sounds mechanical or robotic. It doesn't sound any different. How can I do that? Transitions are the glue that join your sentences, join your paragraphs, join your thoughts and ideas. So I've got a list of transitions I'll post probably in the next week or so. But think of this, when you're trying to start a sentence or connect from one idea to another, repetition is what usually gets you in trouble. If you start every sentence with next, 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 or the, you know what I'm talking about. There are no transitions, and so every sentence sounds very disjointed and not connected or joined to each other. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're getting further on the list. Question sources and evaluate information. I think I'm probably going to move this one up the list because in the last 4 years, I have never seen so much outright misinformation everywhere. You call it fake news, you call it, you know, a disease of social media, whatever. Memes are culprits a lot of times. It's important that you look at a source and you kind of question its reputation and its background. Now, in this class, you only can use GRCC database sources. You can't use Google searches, or you can't use sites that maybe have a bent. They lean very left or they lean very right. We're looking for scholarly centrist sources. And I'll just throw this out there, and I'm going to be blunt, but if I hear more people talking about stop the steal or it was a stolen election, there's nothing to prove that. There's absolutely nothing to prove widespread election fraud. In fact, I wrote a whole essay about this in 2016. Is this really an issue? And you know what? It's something our country does very well compared to other countries. So I guess you can believe what you want. You know, you can believe in Santa Claus and Sasquatch, but question and evaluate sources, because just because people believe something doesn't always make it accurate or correct or right. Moving along. Number 3, know your audience and make your argument clear. So most people will say, well, Todd, you're my audience, and you are definitely. I am your audience, I should say. But your fellow students are, and depending on the essay that you're writing, it may have a larger audience. For example, we don't have time in a 7-week course to pull this off, but in a 15-week course, I usually have my students write letters, I talk sometimes with 2 words in my head, letters to their congressmen or to their state representatives about an issue that's important to them. I've had students write essays about line 5, standardized testing, the steps. And I think that's an important exercise because it makes you focus not just on the person next to you or in the classroom or your instructor, but an actual legislator somewhere out there. And most of the times they respond. They really like that. When their constituents contact them. They usually ask for money too, but you don't have to do that. But know your purpose, you know, and the audience together so that you know what you're writing is targeted toward them. All right, we're getting close to the end. Number 2, let your writing cool. It's important to pause. When you're clacking away at the keyboard, you know, right before an assignment is due, your motivation is to get it finished. Build in an extra day, even 2 days. Now, we take this writing through drafts before they get to finals, and so we build in a cooling off period for you. You don't get that in your other classes, but it's important. You've probably seen this happen before. If you're up late, for example, and you're typing and you're writing, you let it sit and you come back at it with, like, you know, fresh cup of coffee in the morning, fresh eyes. You will be appalled, to be honest, by the number of mistakes you'll find. That's because when we are under stress and fatigue, we are naturally going to make more mistakes. So let your writing cool, and you'll be surprised when you come back to it, how different it looks and how much more you'll improve it with that second chance in there. All right, my number 1 bit of advice. You might not know what it is, but it's simple, but very effective. Always, always, always read your writing out loud, out loud. If you could only take one idea and integrate it into your writing in this course, this is what I would say. Always read your writing out loud. Why do that? Why can't I just look at it, Todd? Well, your eyes may not see. Again, writing fatigue, stress. You get used to your own errors sometimes. You don't see them. but when read aloud, your ears will hear many, many more things than your eyes will catch. I still do this today. I just wrote a letter to the editor for the Allegan newspaper for my wife's nonprofit, and I'm reading it out loud to myself. When I worked in a cubicle, when I wasn't an instructor for a few years, I'd be reading stuff and people poke their eyes over like, what are you doing? You know, what are you talking to? And I'm like, I'm just reading my essay, leave me alone. Or I'd be reading some text. Even better yet, if you're really brave, give it to someone else and have them read it out loud while you're listening, because you'll have a conversation. They'll stop and say, I don't know if I got that, or it'd be like, oh, that didn't make sense. And so you build in this dialogue and this communication about how to improve your writing. So those are the top 10 things that I have been talking to people about for years. Priority on the list sometimes changes, but those concepts are still the same. So where are you with these top 10? How would you rank yourself? Which ones do you need to improve in? Which ones have maybe you've never used before? Maybe there are some things on here you're really good at already. I have a couple students right now who are just aces at giving credit in MLA. I often wish I could like clone them and move them around, the internet somehow as AI so that they could help their fellow students. But this is an opportunity to improve on any one of those categories. And so when you look at those top 10, which ones can you look at and then make yourself a little bit stronger and more confident writer? Talk to you again soon.